Welcome back to our channel, where we dive deep into the timeless stories of the Bible to uncover the profound lessons that still resonate today. In today's episode, we bring you the gripping and tragic tale of Absalom's rebellion, a story of ambition, betrayal, and the consequences of pride. Imagine being a prince, handsome, powerful, and loved by the people. Imagine growing up in a royal palace, knowing that one day you might wear the crown. But what if, instead of waiting, you decided to take the throne by force? What if your own father, the mighty King David, stood in your way? Would you betray him? Would you turn the hearts of the people against him? This is the story of a son who let pride and anger take control. A son who stole the hearts of a nation but lost everything in the end. A son who learned too late that when you fight against God's plan, you can never truly win. Once upon a time, in the great and powerful kingdom of Israel, there was a mighty king named David. He was a man after God's own heart, a warrior who had defeated giants and enemies, a shepherd chosen by God to lead his people. Under his rule, Israel had become strong and victorious. King David had many sons, but one of them stood out above the rest, his third son Absalom. Absalom was not just a prince. He was the most handsome man in all of Israel. He had long, flowing hair that people admired, and he carried himself like a future king. The people loved him for his charm, his beauty, and his confidence. But deep inside, Absalom held a secret. A seed of rebellion was growing in his heart. He was angry with his father, King David, and this anger would soon lead to one of the greatest betrayals in Israel's history. Absalom had a beautiful sister named Tamar. She was kind and gentle, and her beauty was well known. But their half-brother Amnon, the firstborn son of King David, did something terrible. He tricked Tamar and hurt her deeply, bringing shame to their family. When Absalom found out what Amnon had done, his heart burned with rage. He waited for justice, but King David did not punish Amnon. David was angry, but he did nothing to discipline his son. Absalom's anger turned into hatred. He decided to take matters into his own hands. 2 years passed, and then Absalom set a trap. He invited all of his brothers, including Amnon, to a feast. When Amnon was enjoying himself, Absalom's men attacked and killed him in revenge for Tamar. The news reached King David, and he was devastated. One son was dead, and another had become a murderer. Absalom knew that his father would be furious, so he ran away to another kingdom, the land of Geshur, where his mother's family lived. For 3 years, Absalom stayed in exile, waiting, wondering if his father would ever forgive him. David's heart was torn. He loved Absalom, but he could not forget what he had done. Joab, David's military commander, saw that the king longed for his son. He came up with a plan to convince David to bring Absalom back. King David finally allowed Absalom to return to Jerusalem. But there was one condition. Absalom was not allowed to see the king's face. Even though he was back in the city, David refused to meet him. Absalom was angry. He was a prince, but his father treated him like a common criminal. For 2 more years he waited, but David still did not call for him. Frustrated, Absalom did something bold. He set fire to Joab's fields to get his attention. When Joab confronted him, Absalom said, "Why did my father bring me back if he will not see me? I might as well have stayed in exile." Finally, Joab convinced David to see his son. When Absalom came before the king, he bowed low to the ground, and David forgave him. It seemed like their relationship was healed, but in Absalom's heart, something dark was still growing. Even though David had forgiven Absalom, Absalom had not forgiven David. He still believed his father had failed him. He wanted to take the throne for himself. He started standing at the city gates, where people came to seek justice from the king. When people arrived, Absalom would stop them and say, "Where are you from? What problem do you have?" When they explained, he would shake his head and say, "Oh, if only I were king. I would listen to you. I would give you justice. I would make sure you were treated fairly." Slowly, people began to admire Absalom more than David. The Bible says Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. For 4 years, Absalom secretly built a following. Then, when the time was right, he made his move. He asked King David for permission to go to Hebron, pretending he wanted to worship God. But this was a lie. Once in Hebron, Absalom sent messengers throughout Israel, declaring himself as king. Trumpets blew, and people shouted, "Absalom is king in Hebron." Even some of David's trusted advisors joined Absalom, including Ahithophel, one of the wisest counselors in the kingdom. When David heard the news, his heart broke. His own son had betrayed him. Absalom was coming with an army, and many Israelites had already joined him. David knew he could not stay in Jerusalem. He and his loyal followers fled into the wilderness, weeping as they left the city. Even in this painful moment, David showed humility. As he walked, a man named Shimei, who hated David, threw stones at him and cursed him. David's soldiers wanted to kill Shimei, but David said, "Let him curse me. Maybe God will see my sorrow and have mercy on me." Meanwhile, Absalom arrived in Jerusalem and took over the palace. He asked Ahithophel for advice on how to defeat David. Ahithophel told him, "Take over your father's throne in a way that will show everyone you have completely replaced him." Absalom followed this terrible advice, and soon all of Israel believed he was the new king. Ahithophel had one more piece of advice. He said, "Let me take 12,000 men and attack David tonight while he is weak." This was a good plan. If Absalom had listened, he might have won. But Absalom decided to ask another advisor, Hushai, for advice. Hushai was secretly loyal to David. He told Absalom, "No, your father is a great warrior. If you attack now, he will defeat you. Instead, gather a huge army from all over Israel, and then you can crush him completely." Absalom liked Hushai's plan better, but it was actually a trap. Hushai secretly sent a message to David, warning him to escape and prepare for battle. David's army grew stronger, and soon the final battle began in the forest of Ephraim. David's soldiers fought bravely, and Absalom's men began to fall. As Absalom tried to escape, his long, beautiful hair got caught in the branches of a tree. His mule kept running, and he was left dangling in midair. David had commanded his men, "Do not harm Absalom. Bring him back alive." But Joab, the commander, ignored this order. He took 3 spears and struck Absalom, and the soldiers finished him. A messenger ran to David and told him, "Your enemies have been defeated." David asked, "What about Absalom? Is he safe?" When he heard that Absalom was dead, David broke down in tears. He cried out, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son, my son, if only I had died instead of you. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son." Even though Absalom had betrayed him, David still loved him deeply. Absalom was a prince who had everything: beauty, charm, and the love of the people. But instead of trusting God's plan, he let bitterness and pride take over his heart. His rebellion cost him his life, and his father was left in sorrow. This story teaches us that pride and anger can destroy us, that forgiveness is better than revenge, and that no matter how much we fail, God is always in control. Though Absalom tried to steal the throne, God had already chosen David as king. In the end, God's plan always wins. Stay tuned as we unravel the dramatic rise and fall of Absalom. Kindly subscribe to this channel, like, and comment.